Hi, and welcome to a Sense of Wellness podcast, inspiring and empowering a healthier you. I'm your host, Susan Greeley, and I'll be diving deeper into the 4 pillars of wellness: sleep, exercise, nutrition, and stress management. In today's episode, I will be talking about my passion, which is health and healing through food. My guest today, who is a true pioneer in the science of food as medicine, has discovered more than 200 foods that activate the body's health defense systems. We will be talking about how to eat not only to beat disease, but also to eat more foods you love that help you live longer and better. I hope listeners also come to discover just how powerful foods are for health and healing, because the body does have amazing healing abilities when you understand how to activate and support our natural health defense systems, which my guest is an expert on. With that, I'm very happy to introduce Dr. William Li. Dr. Li is an internationally renowned physician and scientist. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Eat to Beat Disease: The New Science of How Your Body Can Heal Itself. Dr. Li is the president and medical director of the Angiogenesis Foundation, and his groundbreaking work has led to the development of more than 30 medical treatments and impacts care for more than 70 diseases, including heart disease, cancer, diabetes, blindness, obesity, dementia, and many more. And for listeners who have not yet watched his TED Talk, Can We Eat to Starve Cancer?, then I highly recommend it. It has garnered more than 11 million views. As I said, Dr. Li is a true pioneer in this field. And for listeners who want to learn even more after this podcast, you can join Dr. Li for one of his free master classes, which he will give you more information about. Now, all that said, I'm excited to get this conversation started. Dr. Li, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. So I'll start by just asking you about your personal and professional path to where you are, including what sparked your passion for medicine and more specifically nutrition science and food as medicine.
Yeah, well, so I'm a MD. I'm a physician, internal medicine. And what that means is that I take care of young and old, men and women, and healthy and sick. And my own personal orientation in all of that has always been to try to keep people as healthy as possible, recognizing as we go through our journey in life that, sometimes we fall off the rails of being healthy. And my goal has always been to get people from sickness back to health. And I believe that sort of the continuum of sickness and health is really a circle. So if you go down on the health thing, we want to get you back up to 12 noon at the top of the circle, which is really where our health should be. I'm also a scientist, so I'm a vascular biologist. And what that means is I study blood vessels. And what's really important about blood vessels is how extensive they are. I mean, anything we eat has to go into our blood vessels, and we've got 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels packed inside our bodies. And those vessels deliver every bit of nutrition that we eat has got to be delivered through these highways and byways to our cells and our organs. So when our blood vessels are healthy, it allows our organs to be healthy. When our blood vessels are sick or have a problem, that's really where a lot of these chronic diseases actually occur. And even some of the acute diseases, because now we know that even COVID is a vascular disease that affects blood vessels. So I've been involved with, over the last 20, 30 years, with developing a lot of biotech treatments aimed at either restoring health of blood vessels. And it was really because of all of my work in biotech that I realized that, as important as life-saving treatments can be, the reality is that, that's treating the horse out of the barn. Could we actually intercept the disease before it's even established? And so that's prevention. When you talk about prevention, you really can't talk about drugs. You got to talk about something like food that's widely available. And so I wound up actually thinking about what I had at my disposal, which is really sophisticated tools for drug development. And I realized that people had never really applied these tools to studying food. So literally, I have studied food as medicine using the same systems in which drugs are developed. And so that's part of the breakthrough that I'm actually contributing to, is how do we really understand what food does with the same science, the same rigor, the same approach as we understand how medicines can help us. I'll actually kind of a spoiler on this, which is, it turns out that in many cases, the foods are more powerful than the medicines.
That's a huge spoiler. It is fascinating. And I'm so excited for you to give us more specifics. So I'm going to ask you a bit about, not a bit, a lot about Eat to Beat Disease. And first, I'm seriously going to say thank you for writing this book. It is really life-changing and I think will be life-saving even for many people, quite honestly. So I just wanted to say that. And then I love that in Eat to Beat Disease, to the point that you were just saying, you point out that healthcare in this world has really been more focused on disease care, and you're putting the health back in healthcare. I love that. You explain in very understandable terms a lot of the science about how we can allow the body to heal itself. And you focus on the 5 health defenses and then the specific foods that are used to promote or prevent specific functions. Let's dive into it. There's so much there, and you have your 5 by 5 by 5 plan. So let's dive in and please tell us what it's all about.
Okay. Well, I wrote the book because I realized that food has immediacy. When you do research on drugs, it could take 10 years before anything ever happens successfully with it. But when you do actually research with food, it's got immediacy. So if I told you that eating tomatoes could lower the risk of prostate cancer, and you heard that, you could put that into action right away, like after you heard it. Whereas if I told you something about a treatment for prostate cancer that's pharmaceutical, that's not something that you could actually do yourself. And so that's why I wrote the book, to take this science, take this information and help people become aware of it so they could be inspired to make changes and take actions themselves. It started really because I asked myself a question, which is, what is health? And I'm a doctor. And so I can tell you that, even doctors will answer the same way. Most people think about health as just the absence of disease. If I'm not sick, I'm healthy. I mean, that way oversimplifies. It's not entirely true. Health is much more than just the absence of disease. When you say something is an absence of something else, like it's not operational. You can't do something about the absence of,
Right.
Poverty is the absence of money. Well, what can you do about that? Well, got to get a job. And the same thing is sort of like, I was looking for ways to understand that better because it was really very unsatisfying to me as a researcher. And we didn't have a better handle on what health is. So that's what I write about my book, is really my discovery that health is much more than simply the absence of disease. It is the result. Your health is a result of your body's hardwired health defenses that are doing battle with all these forces around us that are trying to cause disease in our body. And our health defenses are just, swashbuckling to try to repel all those evil forces and helping our body stay as good as it can be. Now, I'll tell you what the health defenses are in a second. But I want to preface this by saying these are not sort of magical things that appear suddenly, and some people have more of them and some people have less of them. Every single one of us has our health defenses because they are formed in the womb. Shortly after our mom's egg met dad's sperm, these health defenses started to form over 9 months. So when we were born, our body had this hardwired into us. It's in our hard drive. And basically, and in fact, they're firing in all cylinders, our health defenses. From the day we're born until our very last breath, they are still trying to keep us healthy. So what are they? There's 5 of them. Number 1 is our circulation. I just told you 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels. You can imagine how important these vessels are to defend our health. Too many blood vessels cause problems. Too few blood vessels cause problems. So our body knows how to titrate just the right number so we have just the right healthy amount of blood vessels. Our second health defense system is our stem cells. So most people don't realize is that we regenerate our cells from the inside out. When you and I were kids, Susan, we were taught by our kindergarten teachers that starfish and salamanders can regenerate, but humans can't, right? Yeah. Except that that's wrong. We now know that humans do regenerate slowly. And so what's amazing is that while the biotech community is trying to develop, fancy stem cell therapies, foods that we eat can actually coax out our own stem cells so we can regenerate more quickly from the inside out. So that's the second health defense system. A third one is our gut microbiome. Now, a lot's been made out of our gut microbiome. A lot of people talk about gut health, but I will mention it as a scientist. Our gut bacteria is a very important shield for our health. We've got 39 trillion bacteria packed inside our bodies. These bacteria live as an ecosystem, mostly inside our intestines and our bowels, and they do everything from control inflammation to help control our metabolism to even send signals like text messages to our brain to release social hormones. So they even control our mood. And so our gut bacteria is incredibly important. And what we eat can either harm that ecosystem. So think about poisoning the Great Barrier Reef, an ecosystem you don't want to poison, or protecting it, which is what you do want to do. is to feed foods that are good for our gut bacteria, not bad for our gut bacteria. So we can, our health, our brain, our cardiovascular system, our immune system, our metabolism can be as healthy as it can be. That's our third health defense system. Fourth one is our DNA. Most people correctly recognize DNA as our genetic code, our blueprint for life. However, what most people don't realize is our DNA does a lot more than simply print proteins, the printer instructions. It turns out our DNA protects us against harms from the environment, because when you've got ultraviolet light coming in through your car windshield, like we're not even talking about the sun tanning booth or the beach without sunscreen. Even sitting in traffic, the sun coming in through your windshield can damage your DNA. So how come we don't get skin cancer? Or you're still driving a gas-powered car. I ask people, do you stand upwind or downwind of the pump? And most people look at me like, what are you talking about? Why would I even care? Well, what I tell them is that if you stand downwind, if you can smell the fumes, you're standing downwind. And if you can smell those fumes are damage your DNA in your lungs. So how come you don't get lung cancer every time you fill your car with gas? Turns out our DNA protects us from those harms. And so it can repair itself, fix itself, neutralize incoming. So you have less damage. So you can get through life with an intact DNA. And then the final health defense system everybody knows, after the last 2+ years of the pandemic, is our immune system. I mean, who doesn't recognize how important the immune system is? We need a good, healthy immune system. Our immune system protects us from invaders from the outside, bacteria and viruses. But here's the most profound thing. Our immune system also protects us from invaders from the inside of our body, and that's cancer. A good, strong immune system actually is so powerful, it can wipe out cancer even when you're in your 80s, even when the cancer is spread to the brain. Still powerful enough to wipe that out. And so just to illustrate how powerful that is, former US President Jimmy Carter had a melanoma that had spread to his liver and his brain. And he was put on a medical treatment that just rips the cloak off that the cancers are hiding from the immune system. And then his 90-year-old immune system was powerful enough to spot those cancers and wipe them out completely, which is why he's so healthy. He's completely healthy today and cancer-free. So we know that we can actually do some powerful things with our immune system as one of our health defense systems. And what's really amazing is that each of these 5 health defenses, angiogenesis, our circulation, stem cells, gut health, DNA, our genes, and our immune system, biotech companies are spending billions of dollars to develop treatments when the horse is out of the barn for problems in all these systems. But Mother Nature has beat them to the punch, because there are foods, mostly plant-based, herbs, healthy oils, seafoods, things that I love to eat that actually can help activate our health defenses and boost them when we're healthy and when we're sick.
It's so inspiring and empowering, which is the point of this podcast. I'm sitting here thinking, and I get so excited about this. And that's what is just life altering for people to hear, that they have control over by what they put in their mouths, because disease scares people. But these stories of true healing are, to me, what are the most empowering. So, okay, let me specifically talk about one disease area as we head into National Heart Month in February. Cardiovascular disease really still is the #1 killer of Americans. Can you tell us, what foods have you come to find are the most beneficial in our diet to add to your diet for cardiovascular health?
Yeah, well, so everybody who asks me, okay, what's the most important food for this disease? Or what do you eat yourself? And those are really, really good questions. I totally understand why people ask the question. But let me just say that what's good for the heart is going to be good for the brain, which is going to be good for the lungs and the liver, et cetera, et cetera. But the real question is, what's the evidence behind it, and why? Why do these things actually work? So when I'm asked about heart health, what I will say is we need a good circulation to keep our heart healthy, because our heart pumps the blood through the rest of the circulation. Our heart, by the way, pumps all the nutrients that we eat through the rest of the circulation as well. So we need a really good cardiovascular system. We also need our hearts and the blood vessels connecting the heart to the rest of the body need to be regenerated continuously. So the endothelial cells, these are the cells that line our blood vessels, kind of like a layer of saran wrap inside our blood vessels, allow blood to flow smoothly. That's actually needs to be regenerated. Turns out gut health is really important for our cardiovascular system because it lowers cholesterol, helps lipids that people take statins, but in fact, our gut bacteria kind of hands down beats statins. People with good gut health can come off of statins if you actually, manipulate the right way. It's quite remarkable. Some of the research has been done. So that's important for gut health. Injury to those cells, the endothelial cells in a heart and in the blood vessels, that's due to oxidative stress and inflammation. And so we want to protect our DNA of these cells to neutralize them with antioxidants. And then, of course, immune systems that are overactive in the inflammatory component can also damage our heart. So what are the foods that can actually help achieve all of these dimensions that are super healthy? I'll sort of just start with the crowd pleasers first. It turns out that dark chocolate is one of the healthiest things that you can actually do for your heart. Why? Because, by the way, what is dark chocolate? We're talking about 80% or higher cacao. So number one, cacao, which is the basis for any kind of chocolate, chocolate's a confection. Cacao is what we're looking for. But it's made from cacao is a plant. It's a seed pod. So it's actually a plant-based food, right? Most people don't think about it that way, but it actually comes from a plant. I actually, by the way, tried to make chocolate the other day. I ordered the cacao pods. There's a place in Miami that has them. And so I got these in a box. I opened them up. You want to split them open. And there's these little seeds in them that look like chestnuts. And they have a little white rind of flesh around them that's kind of sweet and sour. So it's kind of like lychee almost. And you can actually eat them. Like people actually eat the fruit off of the cacao seeds. Mm-hmm. And they're really tasty. And then what you can do is you can actually then ferment the seeds. Those things wind up actually fermenting. By the way, fermented foods are good for your gut. Fermented foods actually feed the gut bacteria, and there's fiber in cacao that also feeds your gut for gut health. But the polyphenols that are actually in the resulting high flavonol cacao, they do something amazing. They can actually streamline our circulation. They get endothelial or blood vessel health, so it's good for your heart. They stimulate stem cells to come out of our bone marrow. So, by the way, when we were born, when we were formed in the womb, we were all made out of stem cells. And about a week out of fertilization or conception, our stem cells are starting to form our face and our nose and our organs and our liver. Well, when we're born, like we're pretty much finished as a sculpture, we got extra stem cells. On average, everyone who's born has 750 million extra stem cells. So there's the overage. And those stem cells are packed into our bone marrow for later when we need them. And so cacao coaxes those stem cells out to help replace and repair our cardiovascular system. So we can actually make our blood flow better, our rebound, resiliency of our circulation better. So chocolate is a really good thing. And then the fiber, of course, feeds our gut bacteria and lowers our blood lipids as well. So dark chocolate is one of these heart-healthy foods. Green, healthy, leafy vegetables also have an amazing fiber content that actually can feed our gut bacteria, which also is heart healthy. Now, fiber used to be, when I went to medical school, the teaching was you should eat fiber because it keeps your bowels moving. The fiber kind of irritates your colon and it keeps your poop moving. So you'll pass out all the fatty stuff and you'll absorb less fat. I think that was the best understanding at the time, 30 years ago. Now we know it actually works completely differently. By the way, medical school teaching. So this is really important. We know that when we eat foods that have a lot of fiber, we're absorbing the polyphenols and, green plant-based foods. And there's a lot of fiber that's not digestible. Our human body doesn't digest them. So it tumbles down through our gut to the colon. Now, what we don't eat, what we don't digest and absorb, it turns out we're feeding our gut bacteria because they are nurtured by the insoluble fiber. So we're feeding them and they pay us back for room and board. So we're feeding them the board and we're giving them a room in our gut. And so they're happy when we feed them good fiber. When they're happy, they actually release these metabolites that actually lower inflammation and help our lipids go down, help us heal, increase the growth factors that are in our heart for heart healthiness. And so that's why leafy greens are really good. And not just leafy greens, other plant-based foods like mushrooms can do the same thing. There's an insoluble fiber called beta-D-glucan that's very heart healthy, and it's found in mushrooms. Now, here's an interesting thing. Where's the beta-D-glucan found in mushrooms? It's in the cap, which is what most people eat, but there's twice as much of the fiber in the stem called the stipe in a mushroom. And so when you buy mushrooms, you want to actually eat the tops, of course, the caps, but don't throw away the stems save those, make something with them, cook with them, because they have a lot of this healthy fiber that's good for heart health as well. And so there's so many heart healthy foods. But we just talked a little bit about mushrooms. We talked a little about leafy greens and about chocolate as well.
Oh, so there are so many foods, but just those two foods alone, thinking of cacao, how of those five health defense systems, it supports at least three of them, and one food alone. So this is just giving people really concrete ways to add a few delicious foods to their diet, as you and I were talking about, because people eat based on taste. And so it's like, what do I eat? And oh gosh, there's all this healthy stuff, doesn't taste good and all that. I could talk about that for a while. But to what you're talking about, there really is the importance of the amount you eat, the variety. Can you tell us a little bit about dosing of food, Dr. Lee, and sort of strategies, how to strategically add foods to your diet? And people get sick of me telling them to eat salads and leafy greens every day. You make it sound so much more interesting.
Well, listen, I mean, my philosophy is to love your health by loving your food. I'm such a believer that we should align our pleasure that we have with eating with our health. And if you take a look at my book, Eat to Beat Disease, I included 200 foods, more than 200 foods, that all activate different parts of the health defenses. And what I tell people to do is to take a look at this list and take a Sharpie out or a marker or a pencil and start circling the foods that you already love. And I have not met a single person who I've asked to do this who hasn't, circled like 20 different things. I tell them at the end of that, hey, congratulations, because you've just identified the stuff that you already love that's healthy for you. So start there. And if you start there, you're already way ahead of the game. And so knowing what to eat that's good for you, that you like, that's step one. But then you ask about like, okay, so how do I prepare it? How much do I eat? Those are all really important things as well. So here's what I would say. First of all, if you can actually get good, fresh, healthy, mostly plant-based foods, and there's a lot of them out there, that's, where you get your food is really, really important. Try to know where your food comes from. That just makes a lot of sense. And if it's not obvious, look at the food. Sometimes they've got a little tag on it. You can figure out if it came from Brazil or it came from Portugal or it came from a market down the road. That's important because we should all know where our food comes from. Secondly, try to eat in season, because seasonal foods, Mother Nature does well by the food. All these bioactives, the polyphenols that are found in foods, they are at their peak in terms of the amount when they're in season. So while it's great you can get, strawberries all year long, the fact of the matter is that strawberries are summer fruit, or blueberries are summer fruit. Enjoy those blueberries when they're at their peak, because that's actually where you're going to get the most bang for your blueberry, so to speak. And that's a wonderful thing. By the way, they also happen to taste and look most beautiful right at their peak as well. So, enjoy, like it's an enjoyment kind of thing. And then in terms of like how to prepare them, food combinations can make a big difference. Most people don't know, like, for example, tomatoes have a lot of great nutrients in them, including lycopene. Lycopene is a fat soluble chemical. It's a natural chemical and it dissolves in fat. And it's actually in a chemical form when you pick a tomato off a vine that actually your body doesn't absorb it that easily in the natural form. But if you heat the tomato in a little olive oil, because it dissolves in olive, it's fat soluble, you'll slowly change the chemical structure into a form that your body loves to absorb. And now eating cooked tomatoes or tomato sauce, okay, think Mediterranean diet, is incredibly healthy. And studies of more than 30,000 men have shown those men who eat 2 to 3 servings of cooked tomatoes, about a half cup each time, have a 30% lower risk of developing prostate cancer, because the lycopene cuts off the blood supply feeding cancer. So cooking can make a difference. Some people say, well, I should eat raw food all the time. I disagree. I think in some cases that may be true, but actually most of the time cooking allows us to combine lots of delicious ingredients together, which makes us want to eat it. Now, what about volume? Volume is really important because all the research that we've shown says that if we actually don't stuff ourselves with calories, overeat, we're going to be healthier. We've all done it. You go to your favorite holiday meal and you sit down and there's so much food and so much stuff that you love. You just keep on eating. And when you've done it to yourself where you're like, oh God, I should have had that extra serving. And you went from feeling pretty good to not feeling so good. Like, we've all done it. There is a really profound mantra that, in fact, the Chinese philosopher Confucius came up with like 3,000 years ago, but the Japanese translated it. It's called a Harahachi Banmi. And that basically is it's like something you'd find inside a fortune cookie that basically says, don't stuff yourself. Stop eating when you're 80% full. So that's like filling up your gas tank, but you don't wait until it bubbles over. Stop when it's 80% full, and then just push back and don't finish eating everything. What that'll do is that will make sure that you're not overstuffing yourself with calories. If you put too many calories in your body, overeat, even if you're eating a lot of good, healthy foods, you are putting a strain on your body's metabolism. Every now and then, it's okay. If you do it regularly, you are going to overload your body's system. And we know that you accelerate cellular aging. Your telomeres that control your chromosomes, which protect your DNA, they shrink faster when you overeat, when you've got too many calories. And they slow down. You slow down cellular aging when you don't overeat. When you actually undereat, it's actually a really good thing. Leave the party before it's time. Leave room for dessert, all that kind of stuff. All absolutely true. And so what I always tell people is a couple of rules about eating. Number one, I tell people, first, immediately quit the clean plate club. That's something that you might have heard from your parents or your grandparents when you were growing up. If you didn't put the food on your plate, you don't have to eat it all. All right. And that's true for a restaurant too. And you should only eat till your body tells you when to stop. And that's about 80%. Like stop before you're full. Like leave room for an extra helping, because enjoy that food. And you can do that by eating a little bit more slowly. And the quantities of food that you eat. And I have a section of my book called Food Doses. There are foods that have been studied. So for example, 10 grams of soy protein, which is about the amount you get in a cup of soy milk, lowers the risk in 5,000 women studied at risk for breast cancer who have breast cancer. It lowered the risk of breast cancer mortality if you have 10 grams of soy protein. So that urban legend is false. Soy actually lowers the risk of breast cancer, doesn't raise it. And why? Because there's a chemical called genistein in soy that actually cuts off the blood supply trying to feed cancers. But that's a dose that people can do. Like eating healthy isn't necessarily, well, I guess I should only eat soy, or I guess I should only eat tomatoes. Should I eat a bushel full of tomatoes? Absolutely not. Anybody can eat 2 to 3 servings of cooked tomatoes a week. I mean, if you think about it, a half cup serving each time, that's not a lot of tomato sauce to put on whole grain pasta, for example. So the research has shown when you use food as medicine, it's diversity, it is moderation, and most of it is in the form and formulas in volumes that are actually readily achievable that people can actually get behind. They taste great too.
Sure do. Moderation, variety, making it doable. It all makes sense when you put it in these terms. Back to the overeating, though, I want to say we do know there's so much research to back up that overeating, overfeeding humans is detrimental. Yet I want to also touch on that food is love, and people want to eat the foods they love. There are so many good, healthy, whole plant foods that I think people need to add to their diets. As far as though giving people more positive messages, there are things that we eat, such as, or these, messages that all carbs are bad, or desserts, or people want their alcohol too and enjoy some of these things, Dr. Lee. So I know there are a lot of food myths and just inaccurate messages out there, as we were saying with soy. Do any other food myths come to mind, like foods that have gotten a bad rap, but actually convey some surprising benefits? Are there others of those that come to your mind?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've already just touched on tomatoes, which are definitely beneficial. And people say tomatoes are a member of the nightshade family.
Yeah, they're scared.
So they're scared of them and they shouldn't be eating them because nightshades are poisonous and because they've got lectins in them. Lectins are very important for blood vessels. So I happen to study lectins. And here's the truth of it, is there are hundreds of different kinds of lectins. And yeah, there are some lectins that are poison. They just don't happen to be in a tomato. I think, these are well-intentioned people that started to put together puzzle pieces. They're not scientists. They put together the puzzle pieces and then they try to talk about them as if they were true. And the reality is that you have to look at human evidence. People have been eating some of these foods like tomatoes for thousands of years, and they've only shown, all the research has shown positive benefits. So tomatoes and lectins and nightshade are a myth, and it's not true. Tomatoes are beneficial. Soy, the urban legend that soy causes breast cancer, completely the opposite. Soy lowers the risk of breast cancer. In Asia, when a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer or has a gene for breast cancer, they do not tell her to eat less soy. They tell them to eat more soy, because all the research supports that the more soy you eat, the lower the risk of not only breast cancer, but lung cancers and other cancers too. There is a myth about coffee being harmful for the heart. I remember when I was in med school, they used to say, well, don't drink too much coffee. You're going to learn about this in pharmacology class, that the caffeine is going to, cause your heart to beat too fast and it could provoke a heart attack. Totally the opposite. In coffee, which is a plant-based food, right? Coffee is made from beans, and the beans are really just the seed pods from a coffee plant. They contain lots of polyphenols. One of them is called chlorogenic acid. And the chlorogenic acid of coffee actually protects the heart. It protects your blood vessels in the heart. And studies have shown that those people who drink more coffee, like about 3 cups or so, up to about 3 cups a day, actually have a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. And so quite the opposite. Coffee doesn't cause heart attacks. It actually lowers the risk of heart attacks. That's another urban legend. Another type of urban legend that's out there is sugar in fruits is harmful to you. So don't eat fruit. Well, look, let me kind of repackage that message. Added sugar, which is what you get in a box of cereal or, some kind of ultra processed food in a box or a bag. Those things that have added sugar overload our body's metabolism very, very quickly. And that actually is destructive to our health defenses. And it harms our microbiome too. So you don't want to really do that. All right. But natural sugars like fructose found in not just fruits, but in vegetables, your body can handle that. Plus, when you eat a fruit, there's an example I give. I'm somebody who really, really loves a perfectly ripe peach in the summertime. Juicy peach off a tree. You can smell that thing, from a foot away. Like, man, that's one of my favorite foods. Really sweet. Not only do you get the fructose that my body can easily handle, but you get the fiber. You get all those other polyphenols. So when you eat fruit, you are getting natural sugars at a level that your body can handle, along with dietary fiber, along with all these other polyphenols. And so don't be afraid of the fruit. You're getting a lot more than the sugar. Don't oversimplify a fruit to just its fructose levels. Most people who, are generally healthy can easily handle fruit. Now, there are obviously, if you've got diabetes, you got to sort of consult your physician to make sure that, you're having moderation with the amount that you eat. But that's another myth as well, that, stay away from fruits because they've actually got a lot of sugar in them. Just the opposite. A good ripe fruit is packed with fiber and polyphenols, and there's nothing better than that.
Right. And fueling the good gut microbes. And what I like to tell people too is that most Americans, I don't know one person who's gotten fat or developed chronic disease from eating too much fruit, number one, and most Americans simply don't eat enough fruits in particular. So thank you for pointing that out. Back to coffee for 1 second. I think coffee is, from what I've read, is the biggest source of antioxidants in the American diet. I personally consume quite a bit of it and am a fan, a proponent. You do one thing that jumped out at me in your book too, if you don't mind touching on quickly: beer, cheese, and bread, or I'm going to say grains in particular, whole grains.
One of the things that I do as a scientist is I just use science very objectively. So I don't really care what food I'm studying. I'm just interested in what the results are. By the way, that's how scientists do it. You blind yourself sometimes to what you throw into the experiment, and you don't try to bias yourself. So if you threw this or that into it, it doesn't matter what other people think. Let's see what the science actually shows, what the results are. And that's where you get these actual surprises that can be delightful. That part of the food is medicine research. You get shock and awe, and you get surprise and delight all at the same time. And the surprise and delight that I found with something like cheese, is, look, there's no going around this. Cheese has a lot of saturated fat and a lot of salt, okay? That's not so good for the body. And if you eat a ton of cheese, you're going to be doing your body a disservice. It's not healthy to eat a lot of cheese. But when you do the research in cheese in humans, what you find is that, people who eat a couple of slices of cheese every day, like in Germany, they actually have lower levels of heart disease. They also have lower levels of some types of cancer. So that's a head scratcher. Why would that be? So then you go to figure out what's in the cheese. Well, in some forms of cheese, especially hard cheeses, you actually have a vitamin called vitamin K2. Now, this is different than the blood thinning vitamin K. This is actually the type of vitamin K that actually cuts off the blood supply to cancer. Bacteria that are the starter for the cheese actually kick out vitamin K2 as kind of a byproduct of just the bacteria growing there during the fermentation process. Now, some cheeses like Parmigiano Reggiano, which is such a tasty cheese, and you don't need a lot of it to give a great flavor, actually is made with a natural starter bacteria called Lactobacillus reuteri. Now, Lactobacillus reuteri is a natural human gut bacteria. And I've done the research with people at MIT in Boston showing that Lactobacillus reuteri actually speeds up wound healing. There's been research to show that it makes your skin better, can make your hair shinier, raises your immune system. So you have to be careful about the saturated fat and salt in cheese, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Every now and then, if you're going to do something because you enjoy that food, you can give yourself the knowledge that there are some benefits to it as well. And of course, bacteria, cheese is a probiotic food as well. Now, beer and red wine, for example, people talk about red wine as well. Like, how could beer be healthy? Well, here's the newsflash. It ain't the alcohol that's healthy. The percent ethanol that's in your beer or in your wine is actually not healthy for any of your health defenses. In fact, alcohol, ethanol is a neurotoxin. It kills brain cells, not surprisingly, right? But the process of fermenting food, whether it's kimchi, sauerkraut, or beer or wine, that fermentation process brings out natural chemicals that can activate your health defenses. So in beer, there are a number of bioactives that are pulled out of the hops. That's the barley the whole grain is brewed from. And that's the stuff that makes beer cloudy. If you hold up a glass of beer against the light, it's kind of cloudy. There's some stuff floating there. Those are the healthy polyphenols that are useful. People who drink modest, and that's underscore, modest amount of beer, you get the alcohol too, but you're really getting some of these other healthy polyphenols, has been shown to lower the risk of kidney cancer. And that doesn't mean that people who are afraid of kidney cancer should drink lots of beer. But what I'm saying is that what the research shows us is that not everything that you think is harmful is harmful. Some of them actually have useful chemicals, natural chemicals that can actually lower your risk of disease as well. So again, coffee you mentioned is something that is, I think it's water, most common beverage, then followed by tea, usually green tea. Then I think coffee is the third most popular beverage worldwide. And, tea and coffee, these are plant-based foods. So they just fall within that natural order of what we know. Consuming plant-based foods is healthy for you.
And all of these fabulous phytonutrients that you're talking about, what I would, a self-declared phytonutrient geek, I could talk about them all day and all the various compounds, these plant compounds that there are thousands and thousands of. And so even understanding that take it back to these foods that I really just like to deliver positive messages and give people that information. As you're saying, you're educating them, and then you make a conscious choice to enjoy a beer in moderation. And again, it's all about balance, variety, moderation. Those are consistent messages. In your very busy daily life, how do you balance eating well and making time I know you love to cook. We both do. We're talking about that. So how do you ensure that you're eating well every day? What are some of your own personal tips?
So I always get asked, Dr. Lee, what do you eat? And what I actually tell people is that I could give you a list of what I ate. Okay. But what I prefer to do is to tell you how I eat, not what I eat. And how I eat really is informed by healthy eating patterns and a lot of traditional eating patterns as well. So I sort of pick from the Mediterranean and I pick from Asian food cultures, old traditional food cultures. So what do I do every day? Like I'll get up in the morning and I'll have a cup of coffee. All right. I spent time living in Italy. People have a single cup of really strong black coffee. It's like an espresso in the morning. So I'll do that. And I know that I'm getting my chlorogenic acid. I'm getting my coffee polyphenols. It also, gives me a little jolt. I wake up a little bit. It helps me kind of get going in the morning. It's also good for me. In the morning, I tend to eat lightly and I'll eat usually fruits. So whatever's in season, I'll try to eat that. Now, people say, well, in the summertime, you're really lucky because if you're able to go to a fresh market, you can get nice fruits, whether it's berries, I always try to shop seasonally. But what about in the winter? What do you do in the cold months? Well, most people don't realize that citrus is actually mostly a winter fruit. So go for your oranges, your mandarins, your tangerines. What I love about like mandarins is you can just peel them with your fingers and you can just eat them like bite size without getting messy. You get the vitamin C. Vitamin C lowers inflammation. So when I'm eating, I always tell people like I try to eat with intention. First intention is I want something that really tastes good. I don't want to be eating stuff that doesn't taste good. You only have a certain number of meals in your life if you're like an actuarial. And so if you can actually calculate how many more meals you're going to have in your life. Why would you ever want to waste one of those putting something that doesn't taste good in your mouth? So I treat every eating opportunity as a precious opportunity to do something that pleases me, that gives me joy and enjoyment. And I encourage everyone listening to this to really take the time to just try to figure out what do you really love to eat? And if you sat down and listed them all out, you'll find that you love to eat some things that are really, really good for you. So focus on those things. So, coffee, fruits, I'll eat a little carbs, I'll some bread or something, or sometimes a muffin, and if I can get it whole grain, I'll do that. I would love to eat that, but I eat lightly during the morning. And at lunchtime, I'll try to eat a salad or eat something that I don't have a lot of time. So I don't want to sit down and have a fussy meal. So if I can have something that puts a lot of diverse, beautiful, tasty ingredients together, a soup, a stew, a salad, something easy. I just don't have time to cook. I make it my rule in life. My mission in life is to eat tasty things. And it's possible. And that's the kind of thing. And then dinner, I'll take a little more time. I'll be more patient and I'll take the time to make sure I'm making something that's tasty because I know I can bring it as a leftover the next day as well. So there's pragmatism. Something that you and I talked about a little earlier before this podcast is most people don't realize that you can take tins of fish or canned fish, things that most people would try to stay away from. Here's another urban legend that's been going around for years. People say, stay away from the middle aisles. I would say, you know what, there's a lot of junk in the middle aisles, but don't stay away from the middle aisles. Go in there and get the treasure. Okay. And
Right.
Some of those treasures are actually in the tin section or can section with canned fish. Now, we want to get sustainably caught fish. We don't want to, be netting dolphins and turtles, but you can actually find these things. And most people don't know that they're tinned fish in Europe, Portugal, Spain, south of France, Italy, Greece, that it's a delicacy. So you can get sardines, you can get anchovies, you can get clams, you can get octopus, you can get mussels, all these amazing foods, tasty, that are tinned. And you got to realize that there is a long tradition of making these things as tasty as possible, seasoning them, packing them with the right healthy oils, putting a little bit of sun-dried tomato or little olives. They taste great. And you open them up, you bust open one of these cans, all right, and you've got like a meal in a tin. And it doesn't take very much to take a fork into a tin of sardines for me. And I will just literally break it up with a fork on a plate. If it doesn't have olive oil, I add a little bit of really great extra virgin olive oil. I'll put some of my own seasoning on it if it's not already seasoned. And I just throw that right onto a bed of greens. I'll saute some spinach. Or if I'm making a pasta, you can just mix it right into the pasta. I mean, all of a sudden you've got like an authentic European meal, Mediterranean style meal that tastes amazing and is healthy.
Oh, it's excellent. I'm laughing because people don't believe it when I say I hand a tin of sardines to my youngest son, and he does exactly that. And I get so excited about it. I love sharing that with people. I love my sardine pasta. People look at me like I have two heads. And I just love that we share the same excitement and palate because I'm on the mission with you to eat tasty foods, tasty, healthy foods that keep us healthy, can help us heal when that need arises. I literally could talk to you all day about this. Just to be cognizant of your time, though, I do want you to give listeners a little bit of information about your masterclass on Eat to Beat Disease because you do offer these free classes to people, right?
Yeah, so part of my global mission is to really be able to get information out that people can use without having to pay for it. Because I think that health is universal and it's part of our freedom to make good choices. So I started this during the lockdown in the first part of the pandemic, where I realized that the healthcare system wasn't able to help people and doctors were not knowledgeable. There was nothing to treat people. This is a great example, by the way. This is where, we learned 2 years ago that you can't count on the healthcare system to take care of you under every circumstance. So what happens is that we, and only we, can create health for ourselves by making those decisions 3 times a day with food. And I realized that, everything that, we need to build up our immune system. We can do that with food. We need to protect our DNA. By the way, just being a couch potato actually speeds up cellular aging. So you need to protect your DNA. Besides exercise, there's foods that you can eat to do that. Our gut health, definitely diet influence. Our regeneration. Who doesn't want to regenerate themselves from the inside out? Of course, people want to look younger, but honestly, the important part is what the insides actually are doing. So you don't want to be looking good on the outside and like be really crappy and old on the inside. You want to regenerate from the inside out, possible with food and our blood vessel circulation. Like if the blood vessels are unhealthy, like they help cancers to grow. And if you don't have enough blood vessels, like, your tissues and organs start to die. Nobody's actually empowering people. So I started during the lockdown to develop these master classes. So I do it pretty much every other month. You come to my website. It's www.drwilliamlee.com. It's drwilliamlee.com. And you just find on my schedule and you sign up for it. And it's free and it's amazing. Like I've had one masterclass where I had 8,000 people from 38 countries sign up for it. So think about the impact, because that's what people are interested in. They're interested in learning something that they can use, they can put to work like right away into making their lives a lot better. So what's really cool is that, these are people from all around the United States, from the coast to the heartland, from the south, from the north. There are no borders to health. And then, like you talk to people from Dubai or people from New Zealand or people from Egypt, they have the same interests and their bodies are the same way. They may have different ingredients they want to play with, but how we actually choose the right ingredients, that's something that everyone does for themselves. So when you hear about this personalizing nutrition, that's what I talk about in the masterclass. How do you actually take these really complicated science that can make a difference in your life? I try to make it easy to understand. And then I kind of boil it down so you can actually convert it into everyday actions. And then for people that really want to do a deep dive, I also offer an online course and people can choose if they want to really go there. But, the master classes are free to anybody. They can just log on. If you've been talking to your family on Zoom, you'll be able to join a master class. It's a lot of fun to do it. And I usually do demos. So I'll actually come up with something new that came out and I'll show people like what it is and how it works and talk about, because I like to cook and I like to eat, I'll usually talk about some culinary or eating foodie aspect of it as well.
For cool, fun food demos, I highly encourage listeners to join in one of the master classes, and you can only benefit from it. And I love what you said. There are no borders when it comes to human health and individuals, and then personalizing it. This is so much fun. I don't want to stop talking. So that just means I have to have you back. And I'm very excited for an upcoming webinar with you and just showing people more of the how to eat to enjoy it and maintain their health. My final question for you today, Dr. Lee, is I ask this of all my guests. What is one thing you're grateful for at this moment?
I'm grateful for having the time in the last couple of years to slow down and take a moment to reflect on what's important to me, what matters to me. And so with all the tragedy and stress and all the things that we perceive that are bad going on in the world, I'm actually really grateful for having that time to slow down and think. And I think that, and having that opportunity allows us to recalibrate ourselves actually. And that's something that's actually important, I think, for everyone who's listening to think about, what really matters to you. And I'm hopeful that people will, among many things, they'll come up with, my health is really important to me. I'm grateful for my health. All right. Well, now you can actually use this information that we've talked about and transfer that into something that can actually be helpful. And if you like what you heard in this podcast, come to my website, sign up for a masterclass, and then we can do even a deeper dive into the same subject.
Thank you. I'm grateful for speaking with you today, for having this opportunity to deliver all this fabulous information to everyone out there who cares to listen and also prioritize their health. My father always said, I grew up hearing this, without your health, you have nothing. And it is very true. And then he would go further. He's the one that I heard the let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And also then when I was studying nutrition, he would just, even though I'm not a physician, he would say, physician, heal thyself. I believe that was another Hippocrates. So these are all, empowering people, and making healthy, daily, delicious food choices is doable. So in any case, I love this. Thank you for sharing all of this. And I do hope to have you back soon. And for listeners, I do encourage you again to check out Dr. Lee at drwilliamlee.com and join in on a masterclass. So thank you again.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you for taking the time to join me and listen to this episode. Listeners can find more information and also subscribe to the Sense of Wellness podcast at www.ccphp.net/SENS www.ccphp.net/podcast. That's www.ccphp.net/sends/podcast. This show is brought to you by Castle Connolly Private Health Partners. We are a concierge medicine organization that partners with exceptional physicians to deliver an unrivaled healthcare experience while also empowering our members to achieve their optimal well-being. Be sure to listen in next time to the Sense of Wellness podcast, and remember, simple daily habits matter most.